So far today, I've spent about £75 on rent, £4.71 on heating and electricity, and about £2.50 on the coffee I had this morning. You see, whether we like it or not, money interacts with us on a daily, probably even hourly basis. So let's have a chat about it. This year, my salary currently stands at £50,000. Now, I'd like you to raise your hand if you would be comfortable sharing your salary with someone else. Maybe about 10% of the room are putting up their hand right now. Okay, when it comes to rent, my wife and I spend £2,350 every single month. Raise your hands if you'd be happy to share how much you spend on rent with someone else. Okay, a bit more, 30% of the room, I'd say. And finally, when it comes to debt, my student loan balance currently stands at £43,061.45. Raise your hands if you would be happy to share the level of debt you're in with someone else. Okay, a lot less. You see, there's something about money that makes us all really uncomfortable. And I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. Who is this guy? He's come on stage, standing in this red circle, trying to pry into our personal finances. And despite having built a career being very candid about money, sometimes a little bit too candid, you see, I have a secret to share with you. I haven't always been like this. I have a memory as a child that whenever I went out for dinner with my parents, I would never dream of ordering anything from the expensive end of the menu. Did I think my parents couldn't afford these options? No. Had I been given a budget for that meal? Again, no. I mean, come to think of it, the difference in the price between the cheap end and the expensive end wasn't even that much. So why did I do this? And why did I simply ask my parents, can I order that thing that I actually want to eat? Fast forward a few years, and I recall being 17 years old. It's about 6 months before I started university, and I was filling out one of the application forms. And I hit this certain question. It said, how much do your parents earn on an annual basis? I had no idea. And I remember just how scared and uncomfortable I felt when I realized there was only one way to figure out the answer. I had to walk downstairs, go up to my parents and say, so how much do you actually earn? Honestly, I'm still feeling a little bit nauseous today having that memory. And it turns out this child version of me wasn't alone. As you grow up in life, there are so many uncomfortable conversations you have to have. Think about it. Sex, religion, politics, but especially for those in the UK, at the very top of the uncomfortable pile sits one topic in particular, which you've probably already guessed, money. With one study showing that as many as 81% of adults in the UK avoid talking about this topic. And another finding out that some couples would prefer to talk to one another about an affair they had than about how they're currently managing their money. Now, the UK isn't alone in this problem. You see, from Brazil to France to Thailand, and as I recently found out, even in Bulgaria, you do not talk about money. So, what can we actually do about this problem? And where do we stand right now? Well, number one, it's very clear that the topic of money is very uncomfortable. And number two is that this problem spreads itself across the entire world. So where do we stand and how can we overcome it? Well, as we said, I want to offer a solution to this. The idea that we need to start talking more about money. With research even finding out that we can overcome these kind of problems by being more vocal and speaking about them, because it's so much more efficient to learn from other people's successes and failures than it is to go about it ourselves. And with it being just so costly to make a mistake when it comes to money, isn't a little bit more efficiency a good thing? So, what does research actually say when it comes to the topic of money? And in particular, why don't we talk about it in the first place? Well, there are three key reasons in particular. Number one, nature. You see, think about yourself as a child, yeah? We get so possessive over the things we own. I mean, if you ever try and take away a toy from a kid, they will cry for hours and hours. And as humans, we are pre-wired to act a certain way when it comes to ownership. And money is exactly the same, right? It's ours. It's not to be shared. It's not to be spoken about. Second, nurture. I want you all to think back to your earliest memory about money as a child. Because whether you like it or not, that's had a huge impact on the way you interact with money today. One study has found out that our financial attitude is set by the age of 7. And lastly, culture. Because a culture sets a society's norms. In the UK, historically, you could tell whether or not someone had money because they simply owned land. You see, money was visual. You didn't have to talk about it because you could see it. So it was removed from the conversation. However, I think we can all agree that, especially with social media today, looks can be very deceiving. Now, to me, those answers are great. I mean, they're backed by science in the first place. But they feel a little bit, I don't know, out of touch. Because if I went up to someone in the UK today and I said, so why don't you actually talk about money? They're not going to go, well, you know, in the UK historically, the implications of owning land means that I don't really want to talk about it. That's just never going to be an answer. But luckily, there has been a study which has given us the top 3 reasons people would actually answer the question, why do you not talk about money? In third place, shame and embarrassment. You see, money is emotional, and money affects some of the biggest decisions in our life. So we'd rather avoid having those emotions in the first place. In second place is the idea of not wanting to burden other people. I mean, if we're struggling to manage our own personal finances, why would we want to pass that pressure on to those around us? And sitting at the very top of that pile is the idea of not wanting to be judged. We fear being resented if we're overachieving, or looked down upon for not measuring up. Best to avoid both and just not bring up the topic altogether. But surely there is some consequences to not speaking about money, and also living in a society that rarely educates themselves when it comes to money. Because I don't know about you, but from my own personal experience, from the age of 4 to the age of 18, and beyond that, to university to the age of 22, I did not learn a single thing on the topic of money. Pythagoras, 100%. Henry VIII's 6 wives, I can list them off by heart. But income tax and how to get a mortgage, not a single lesson. So let's look at some of the statistics coming out of the UK. Because bear in mind, this is the country with the 6th highest GDP in the entire world. So you'd think when it comes to money, they're leading by example. Of course, you'd think wrong. Currently, 20% of adults, that's 40% of the entire population, are not confident managing their money. 1 in every 6 adults currently has less than £1,000 sitting in their bank account, with 1 in every 3 having less than £100. If we actually take a look at some of the averages, the average savings account has £17,365. The median, which arguably could be a better measure of this statistic, has £12,500. And finally, when it comes to debt, 9 million adults currently find themselves in serious levels of debt, with 1 in 3 actively seeking help. That means 2 in 3 are not actively seeking help. Now, that's a lot of statistics I've thrown at you. And I'm a bit of a money nerd, I'm a bit of a maths nerd, but I know that a lot of people aren't, and they might have just thought, I've got no idea what you just said with those numbers. So I will paraphrase. In the UK, when it comes to money, things are not looking good. Not in the slightest. And there was one statistic that I held back, because I think it speaks absolute volumes about this financial taboo that we have and the effects it's having on society. Currently, in the UK again, 2 out of 3 adults, if they lost their job, would not last 3 months without needing to borrow money. Let that sink in. 2 out of 3 adults could not last 3 months without an income. But why do I find that so powerful? And why is that so interesting? Well, earlier I said that the number 1 reason why people actually answer, why do you not want to talk about money, is this idea of, I don't want to be judged. This idea that we're alone, we're isolated. No way can anyone else be going through those same feelings that I'm currently experiencing. But I think the statistic shows the opposite. It shows that you can find people that are going through it. In fact, you're likely to find people going through exactly what you're experiencing, seeing as 66% of the UK do not have their personal finances in order. Okay, so where are we up to so far? 1, money's uncomfortable. I agree. 2, we now know why money is uncomfortable. And number 3, we can see the state this has had, the effect this has had on one of the most developed countries in the entire world. It's all feeling a little bit pessimistic, I would say. But we've also started to notice something else. This idea that perhaps the reason we don't talk about money in the first place is founded on poor evidence and a lack of judgment. This idea that we feel alone, when in truth, there are so many people out there experiencing exactly what we are. So what would the world look like if we started to talk about money a little bit more? Well, as you guessed it, there are a huge number of benefits. From improving your relationships with loved ones, to just generally being better at managing your money. But there are 3 reasons in particular that I want to share with you today, because not only are they backed again by studies, but I've experienced them in my own personal life. About 3 years ago, I released one of the first videos I ever put out on the internet, explaining how income tax worked. It was a video that said, if you start earning over a certain threshold, going into a higher tax bracket, it means that not your entire salary isn't taxed at that amount, just whatever you're earning over that level. Okay? Pretty boring, I agree. A horrible topic. But 3 million views and 3,500 comments would disagree with that sentiment. With comment after comment, of people writing things like, I didn't know this is how income tax worked, or I turned down a raise because this is what I thought happened. And that leads us nicely onto benefit number 1. We need to learn from other people's successes and failures. Thousands of people will never make that mistake again with their income tax, thanks to one 30-second video. And that leads me nicely onto benefit number 2. It alleviates stress and improves our mental well-being. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel so much better when I get something off my chest. And there's a saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. And that saying is backed by science, which says that when we vocalize our problems, we start to heal emotional pain. We become less reactive and become more mindful. What does that actually mean? Well, the other day, I was scrolling on everyone's favorite website, Reddit, and I came across a thread. It said this: just moved back home at 29 years old, I feel like a failure. Now, with social media, you'd probably expect the comments to be flooded with negativity. Things like, yeah, you're a failure, yeah, stop writing this kind of stuff, I can't believe you did this. There were 471 comments in total, and I actually went through every single one, and they said this kind of thing. You're a genius. That is the best move you will ever make in life. What an incredible opportunity. In the current financial climate, this is the smartest thing that you can do. I guarantee the person that wrote that post does not feel like a failure anymore. And benefit number 3. This is how we start to change the narrative. Earlier I told you that our financial attitude is set as young as 7 years old, which means that if we have any hope of changing the taboo around this topic, we need to start now. It doesn't matter if it's a child, a grandchild, a nephew, a niece, a friend's kid, just some random kid walking down the street. Probably don't do the last one. But if we can start speaking to them, this is where we're going to make the difference. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, I actually don't know how to manage my own personal finances, so how on earth can I teach it to a child? Well, maybe use this as the motivation that you need to start learning it yourself, and then start teaching it to the next generation. And please, I beg you, do not overcomplicate this. You do not need to. Do something as simple as what my grandma does. Every time she gives me any kind of money, she says and makes me promise I have to save half of it. And I guarantee you that's had a huge impact in the way that I treat money today. So, I hope you guys are all super pumped to start speaking about money way more than you ever have before. So, it wouldn't be a TED Talk if I didn't leave you with 3 practical steps to actually do this, because I know it can be hard. But before I give you 3 steps on how to do it, let me give you one important fact about how not to do it. I beg you, whatever you do not go to work or wherever you are on Monday morning and start going up to everyone you see and start saying, how much do you earn and what's in your bank account? Because by Monday lunchtime, you'll be out of a job. You have to remember that this is still a taboo topic, right? So we need to treat it with sensitivity and with care. So here are 3 things you can do. Number 1, do just one thing and start small. Maybe you're going to speak to a colleague about how much it costs you to get to work every day, or discuss with your partner about a big financial goal that you'd love to achieve at some point in your life, or perhaps just mention to a friend about a raise that you want to go after at work. These are the little things that you can start with. And remember, by sharing something about yourself, rather than asking them about their own personal finances, they will start to put down their own defenses. Step number 2, talk to someone that you don't know. If it's HR at work, or a financial advisor, or even charities that deal in this subject, there are 2 key benefits. Number 1, remember how we don't like to feel judged? Well, when you speak to someone you don't know, that judgment is completely removed from that entity. And number 2 is the idea that if you speak to a professional, someone that's actually got knowledge on the subject, not only are you going to get something off of your chest, but you also might start to get the solutions to the problems that you're facing. And step number 3 you can take, make a plan. My wife and I, every month, have in our calendar written down, speak about money today, just once a month. And what this does is it allows us to go into that conversation aware of what's going to happen. Neither of us have to approach the other person and say, I think we need to talk about our spending this month, because we know exactly where and when it's going to happen. By putting it in the diary with someone, you're taking a really easy first step, right? Yeah, you don't actually have to have the conversation yet. You can schedule it for a week, a month, whatever it is. But it takes a lot of stress off your shoulder, and it allows you and the person you're going to talk to about money to come into that conversation with full transparency. So, at the beginning of this talk, I think you guys will all remember I shared 3 important facts about myself. I told you how much I earned, I told you how much I spent on rent, and I also told you about how much debt I'm in. And there were reasons behind each one of them. Starting with how much money I earn. You see, studies show that pay transparency has a huge number of benefits, from improving equality of pay, to motivating a workforce, to actually having an increased number of applications within businesses, and finally, towards increasing employee satisfaction due to openness. Number 2, I shared with you my rent. Now I want you to imagine this scenario. You walk into the first ever property that you're going to rent. Maybe you just left university, maybe you just got a job and you have the budget for it, and all you can really ever see is the price that's being advertised. Now if you imagine you looked up, down, right and left, and you could see what they were actually spending on that, how helpful would that be? And lastly, I shared with you my debt. Now I don't think we all need to start shouting about our debts from the rooftops unless you're speaking to an expert. But the reason I did this is because I speak about personal finance every day, so people think that I've got it perfect. By sharing that I'm not perfect, hopefully you guys can take the pressure off of yourselves to understand that this is a journey. So yes, I overshared a little bit, and no, I don't expect anyone to do the same, but together, step by step, let's end the financial taboo. Thank you.